Now, moving on to learning unit 3. When you look at learning unit 3, learning unit 3 looks at rating and scoring systems. So learning unit 3 looks at rating and scoring systems. Now, where learning unit 3 comes in, remember in learning unit 1, where we looked at Bandoyapadi, right? We learned, is it Bandoyapadi or Witzany? We learned about the credit process, right? So we learned about the credit process where we said that when it comes to the credit process, it comes in the 3 phases. There's origination, monitoring and review, and also what happens now at the end if the customer defaults on their obligation as well, right? Now, when you look at the origination phase, this is where we're saying that this is the point from the point where the customer indicates interest in getting credit, and then they get the information from the customer until they now decide to say, how do we now determine whether we should give credit to this particular customer or should we reject giving credit to this particular customer as well? And we also learned that there are different rating systems that companies can also use to actually assess when they're assessing whether the eligibility of the customer to be able to get that particular credit, right? And then we also learned that, so which means that when it comes to the rating systems as well, there can be internal rating systems, which is the rating system that the organization internally can create to say, this is how we come about to say, given the information that we have, the customer is following with this particular credit rating. And if they are following with this particular credit rating, should we give them credit or should we not give them credit? Or they can be using external rating systems, like, for example, Standard & Poor and all those other rating agencies as well to rate these particular customers as well, right? Now, when you look at, so we are now going to, instead learning unit 3, we're going a bit more in depth in understanding the rating and scoring system as well to say, so how does a company do the rating and also the scoring when it comes to understanding the customer's ability to meet their obligations as well. So on learning unit 3, under purpose of the learning unit, the lecturer says, to understand how industry analysis impacts on profitability as part of credit risk analysis and management. Then they say, for learning unit 3, we need to work through chapter 3, which is section 3.1, page 19 to 24, section 3.2, page 34 to 37, and section 3.3, 37 to 39 of Witzany. So when you cover Witzany, these are the pages that I expect you to cover when it comes to chapter 3 of Witzany. So that's why I said when we started off in the first class, I said for Rsk4804, it's very, very important that when you are going through the curriculum for Rsk4804, go through the curriculum according to the study guide so that you're able to see exactly which sections in each of the books, of the 3 books that are going to be using, are you expected to cover for each learning unit. So it's very, very important that you study according to the prescribed information for each learning unit as well. Then they also ask us to go through chapter 2 of Bandoyapadi, and these are the page ranges that we're expected to look at as well. So we're expected to look at 2 chapters from 2 different books. Chapter 3 of Witzany, and then chapter 2 of Bandoyapadi as well, depending, and these are the different sections that we're expected to take note of as well. Then under this as well, typically in the exam, these are the typical type of questions that they're saying we should expect if there's questions coming from in the exam as well. These are the typical type of questions that they are going to expect us to answer as well, where they ask us to differentiate between external ratings and internal ratings. Describe the precautions to take when you rely on external ratings. Then they ask us to look at the computation of the probability of default using the Merton model. And then question number 4, where they ask us to use the ultimate Z-score to determine the Z-score as well, in determining the probability to see exactly, so what is the Z-score, and given this particular Z-score, should we give this credit to this customer, or should we not give credit to this particular customer as well? So which means we are going to look at chapter 3 of Witzany. And as we look at chapter 3 of Witzany, from a calculation perspective, question number 4 is the one that we're going to be looking at, which is relevant to what? The section from Witzany as well. Now, keeping that in mind, when we look at chapter 3 of Witzany, which looks at rating and scoring systems, they say the main goal of the credit assessment process is to approve acceptable loan applications, reject clients that will probably default in the future, and moreover, set up loan pricing so that the credit losses are covered by collected credit margins. This does not have to be necessarily achieved through a rating system. Nevertheless, the approach is of assigning the credit grade on a finite scale to each client and/or exposure has become a general keystone of modern credit risk management process. The rating can be obtained in many different ways. There are external agencies like Standard & Poor's and Moody's, which have been assigning ratings to bond issuers, large corporations, and countries for more than 100 years. So ratings can also be produced by banks internally in many different ways, by experienced credit analysts, by statistical or even artificial intelligence methods, or by combination of human and machine assessment. Before we start describing in detail any particular method, we should first of all define our expectation of a rating system and the methods used to measure how well the expectations are met. Now, when it comes to the quality of rating measurement and validation as well, the rating quality measurement and validation, they say a general rating scheme is shown in figure 3.1. Now, if you check on figure 3.1, they give us a typical rating process where they say you start off looking at the client or getting the client or facility information. Then you use the rating system now to give them a particular score as well. So here they say it starts with the client or facility information. For example, bond issue or new transaction under consideration, and produces a rating or scoring on a scale. Well-known examples of scales are those of the external rating agencies. For example, Standard & Poor's, starting with the worst non-defaulting rating, which is C, and going up to the best rating, which is AAA, or the very similar one of Moody's, starting with C and going up to the best, which is AAA. The only difference there is this is AAA with capitals, this is AAA with A, then small letters as well. Please note, the ratings that are used by these external rating agencies, you don't have to worry much about them. Understand them, but you're not necessarily expected to know these ratings off by heart, because you're expected to know how they work, but not necessarily to know them off by heart as well. So please keep that in mind. So here they say, some banks denote rating classes by numbers, often starting with a 1 denoting the best grade and higher numbers denoting worse grades. In the following, we will use the reverse numbering as a standard scale, which is also used in practice, with 1 denoting the worst grade and higher numbers the better credit grades. The number of grades may vary. Generally, rating scales do not have many grades, typically somewhere between 7 and 25. Rating assigned in the standard numbering are alternatively called rating scores. So they give us those ratings. So that's the basic discussion of the ratings there. Remember, I'm saying the ratings themselves, you don't have to spend much time trying to understand exactly what are these ratings that are given by the different rating agencies as well. You don't necessarily need to know these ratings off by heart. Now, going back to our study guide. Remember in the study guide, they said when we go through Witzany, we need to go through page 19 to 24 when we cover section 3.1. So keep that in mind. That's why you see that the rest of the sections there, I didn't highlight them because we are not expected to cover them as well. Then when we go through page section 30.2, we're expected to cover pages 34 to 37 of Witzany as well. Now, when you look at section 3.2, they look at analytical ratings. And here they say corporate ratings are even today, when there are so many sophisticated statistical scoring techniques in existence, usually obtained by a rating process that is at most only partially automated. The reason is that the key rating factors are not only quantitative, but also qualitative. Management quality, ownership structure, technology, competitive position, legal and regulatory issues can be translated into certain scores, but the assessment must in any case be done by an experienced analyst. Then they say figure 3.8 shows a list of possible business and financial factors in a rating process, corresponding to the methodology of Standard & Poor's as well. So they give us this. You are not necessarily expected to know this off by heart, but keep that in mind, that this is basically what they look into as well when they are looking at the assessment of a rating as well. So in the assessment of a rating, they look at business risk. Remember we said in the previous chapter, when we looked at CB Joseph, when I was introducing you there, I said credit risk can broadly be categorized into two, business risk or financial risk, right? And then when you look at business risk, this is what we looked at when we look at industry risk, when we looked at chapter 6 of CP Joseph as well. So those are some of the business, it was only one of the many business risk factors that we looked at, that we are supposed to know when it comes to business risk as well. Then we said financial risk, we're going to look at it in chapter 8 of CP Joseph as well. And that's one way that you can also analyze the financial risk of an organization. So when it comes to business risk, they say when you are allocating ratings as well, you can look into factors such as industry characteristics, competitive position, marketing, technology, efficiency, regulation, and management. And these factors can also be given a certain weighting so that whatever credit grade you're going to be giving to that particular customer as well, you need also be able to allocate a certain weighting to all these factors as well, as they contribute towards what? The overall business risk of the organization. Then you also need to look at the financial risk of the organization. And when you look at financial risk, you are looking at financial characteristics, financial policy, profitability, capital structure, financial flow protection, financial flexibility, as well as business risk. Then in so doing, you are going to end up having a rating that you're going to be allocating towards the financial risk of the organization as well. Then overall, you are now going to say, after looking at all these factors within the organization, we are now going to do a financial and qualitative analysis. We are going to be meeting with the management. We are now going to end up with having a rating proposal, looking based on what is being analyzed by the rating committee as well. So with all these contributions, this is how you come about with the final rating that is going to be allocated to a particular company as well. So typically, this is the typical rating process that is followed, especially when you look at the rating process that is followed when you look at the internal ratings as well for the organization. Then they also go on to say, rating agencies generally provide issue-specific rating and issue credit rating Most corporations approach rating agencies to request a rating prior to the sale or registration of a debt issue. Some rating agencies like S&P publish ratings for all public corporate debt issues over a certain threshold. For example, $50 million US dollars in the case of S&P. For the purpose of basic research, analysts require financial information about the company, 5 years of audited annual financial statements, The last several interim financial statements and a description of the company's operations, products, management policies, and plans. Meetings with management and visits to facilities are usually an important part of the rating process. The goal is to review in detail the company's key operating and financial plans, management policies, and other factors that may impact the rating. The financial analysis focuses on a number of financial ratios that are compared to the industry averages and to their past values. So table 3.5 shows a sample of commonly used financial ratios out of the many possible ones. And they give us an example here. You don't necessarily need to know these in detail, but just know that these are some of the ratios that are also used as well when they're looking at the financial analysis of the organization as well. You don't need to know them in detail, but you do. Because remember, these ratios, we are also going to look at the important ones that are going to be, when we look at chapter 8 of CB Joseph, we are going to look at these ratios in detail as well. So for now, just know that they can also use these ratios in doing a financial analysis of the organization, but you don't need to know these ratios in detail. Then they say, when the analyst completes the analysis and a rating proposal, a rating committee with a presentation is called. Once the rating is determined, the company is notified of the rating and the major considerations supporting it. Usually, the rating agencies allow the issuer to respond to the rating decision prior to the publication. So such an appeal must be processed very quickly so that the final rating can be published in the media or released to the company. So generally, all the major rating agencies agree that a rating is, in the end, a credit opinion with interpretation as shown in table 3.6. So they give us 3.6 on exactly typically how they give this rating as well. Remember, the ratings that are followed here, you don't necessarily need to know them in detail. Just know the basic breakdown of these ratings as well, but you don't necessarily need to know them in detail. Then the author says, many portfolio managers have investment limits on various securities tied to the ratings, and so rating decisions often have a tremendous impact on the prices of securities and the ability of companies to finance themselves. This importance is even being strengthened by the Basel II regulation, allowing banks to calculate capital requirements according to external ratings in the standardized approach. So we're going to look at the evolution of the Basel Accords in the chapters later on, where we look at the Basel I, Basel II, and the Basel III, and other changes that are also being brought into the Basel 3 as well. So we're going to look at them in a bit more detail, but we are not going to be as too detailed compared to how it's analyzed when you look at market risk in Rsk4805. But we are going to look at the evolution of the Basel Accord as well. So keep that in mind. But I'll also highlight typically how they bring questions relating to the Basel Accords. But we're going to look at that when we go through it in detail as well. So here they say, one of the more widely discussed weaknesses of the external rating process is the institutional conflict of interest caused by the fact that ratings are mostly paid by the issuers and not by the investors. So this has been particularly pronounced during the recent subprime mortgage crisis. Remember, we're looking at the 2007-2008 financial crisis as well. It turned out that the agencies assigned positive ratings to many structured bonds, which is collateralized debt obligations, which later turned out sour, and there is a general suspicion that the high ratings were related to the high fees paid by the rating agencies. So the bonds then qualified as acceptable securities for many institutional investors, which suffered huge losses during the crisis. So that's another issue that one has to keep in mind when it comes to the rating agencies as well, that they get funded by these companies that they're also rating. So there's a possibility or the issue where there's possible conflict of interest as well, because they're being funded by the companies that they're also going to be rating as well, as shown by the suspicions in the 2007-2008 financial crisis as well. So here they say, credit underwriting is a fundamental function of banks, and so banks should have an internal credit assessment capacity, even in cases where the companies have an external rating. So the process and technology in detail vary with different banks, but are in principle similar to the process described above. The process also depends on the type of lending provided, associated asset-based project or unsecured general corporate lending. So in the case of asset-based lending, the emphasis is put on the valuation of the borrower's assets, while the other two types is on the borrower's ability to generate future cash flows. So that's section 3.2 as well. Now, on section 3.3, remember for section 3.3, they ask us to look at page 37 to 39 of Witzany as well, when you look at section 3.3. And here, we're looking at the regression rating systems. And in general, they say, I'm just going to read from the beginning of the paragraph. And here they say, before we turn our attention to the logistic regression model as the most widely used technique in the financial sector, let us list and discuss a variety of possible statistical and other automated rating models. And they give us the first one, which is the econometric models, which include classification trees, random forest, linear and multiple discriminant analysis, linear and logit, which is logistics, and probit regression as well. Then they also give us the shadow rating, which is the model are not based on the history of defaults, but are on a database of the rating decision of an external credit agency. Then there's artificial neural networks, which is to try to mimic the function of the human brain by emulating a network of interconnected neurons. So the networks are also trained on historical data. Then there's the linear programming or support vector machines, which aim to separate sets of good and bad observations, but is represented by the vectors of explanatory variables, possibly after a transformation by a hyperplane or in optimal way. Then they also look at the rule-based or expert systems, which mimic in a structured way the process used by an experienced analyst to arrive at credit decisions. So the systems are built on the expertise provided by the experienced analyst and transformed with an applied logic methodology into a set of decision rules with knowledge base. Then the structural models are typically based on the option valuation theory, considering default as an event where the asset fall below the debt level as well. Then they also say, in this section, we will focus on the mainstream regression models, in particular, the logistic regression scorecard that became a banking industry standard. And here, the model is the Altman Z-score. So they give us a list of these other models that are used as well in analyzing the rating or providing a rating for a particular company as well. But so for exam purposes, take note of them. But the most important one here is that you need to take note of in this case, is the regression model, in this case, which is the Altman Z-score. So that's what we're going to be focusing on as well in today's class. Now, when it comes to the Altman Z-score, they say, when you look at the Altman Z-score, it's a very important concept because it's highly examinable. So the Altman Z-score is a very important concept. It's highly examinable. I've seen this coming in the exams quite a lot, and I've seen this coming in assignments quite a lot as well. So with the Altman Z-score, they say, they give us the Z-score, and yet they say to determine the Z-score that you're going to be allocating to an obliga here, they say the Z-score is given as 1.2 multiplied by x1 plus 1.4 multiplied by x2 plus 2.3 multiplied by x3 plus 0.6 multiplied by x4 plus 0.9999 multiplied by x5, where x1 is the ratio of your working capital to total assets. And then X2 is the ratio of your retained earnings to total assets. And X3 is the ratio of your earnings before interest and tax to total assets. And then X4 is the ratio of your market value of equity to the book value of your liabilities. And then X5 is the ratio of your sales to total assets. Now, typically, when it comes to your exam, the lecturer gives you what the X1 is. They'll even give you and say X1 is this ratio, and this is how much it is. X2, they can give you how much it is as well. What you need to now understand is how they typically ask you questions in the exam. You should now be able to put this information into the formula and then calculate the Z score and then analyze the Z score as well. As shown here, they say the Altman also estimate an optimal upper boundary of 1.81, where if your Z score is less than 1.81, it means there's a high probability of default. Hence, the company it's a failure, so don't give credit to this particular company. And then a lower boundary of 2.99, which is a non-fair, which means if your Z score is more than 2.99, it means there's a very low or negligible risk of bankruptcy, so give credit to this particular customer. Then any Z score between the two boundaries is treated as being the zone of ignorance, which means if the company gives you a Z score which is more than 1.81 but less than 2.99, it means that you can consider giving credit but with caution. So yes, you can consider giving credit to this particular customer that is a Z score of that is greater than 1.81, but the Z score is less than 2.99. But you can only give this credit with caution, which means that more caution should be taken when you are giving credit to this particular customer as well. So you understand this better when we look at an example of exactly how do we calculate this particular Z score and how are we going to be able to apply this particular Z score. And you see that this is what you need to make sure that you take note of in this particular section as well. So make sure that you are able to understand and interpret the formula for calculating the Z score as well. So they give us an example. In this, remember in the study guide, they give us a typical question that they can also give us to calculate the Z score as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the formula for the Z score, and then we're going to look at question number 4 together. But before we do that, I need you to keep in mind that the question on the Z score, there are 3 different formulas which address the issue of the Z score. So there are 3 different formulas. There are 3 different formulas where the Z score is used in the 3 books. Remember, we are using 3 books for we're using the 3 books here, which is the book by Witzany, which is the one that we've seen now. There is also the book by Bandoyapadi, and then there's also the book by C.B. Joseph as well. And the formulas are slightly different. So I'm going to show you the formulas by Bandoyapadi. I'm also going to show you the formula by Witzany so that you are able to understand exactly what are the subtle differences between these formulas. Because when you are answering this question in the exam or assignment, you need to write down the formula for the Z score that you're using. Then after you write down the formula for the Z score that you're using, then you can now indicate exactly your calculation and how you are arriving at your final answer as well. Now, if you look at the formula in the book by Bandoyapadi, if you check in the formula in the book by Bandoyapadi gives us the formula and says here, in your Z score, or in the Z score calculation, your Z score is given as, so your Z score is given as 1.2 multiplied by x1, 1.4 multiplied by x2, 3.3 multiplied by x3, 0.6 multiplied by x4, and 0.999 multiplied by x5. The only difference there is the numbers. I'm going to show you where the differences are. So I'm also going to show you where the differences are. And if you check in the book by C.B. Joseph, I'm also going to write down these formulas as well. The Z score is given as 1.2 multiplied by x1, 1.4 multiplied by x2, 3.3 multiplied by x3, and 0.6 multiplied by x4, and then 0.1 multiplied by x5. And then the interpretation there is as given there as well. And as you can see there, for the book in CB Joseph, they say when your Z score is less than 1.8, sorry, if your Z score is less than 1.8, you have a very high risk of bankruptcy. And if your Z score is more than 2.8, you have a very low rate of risk of bankruptcy. And when your Z score is greater than 1.8, but but less than 2.88, you have a moderate risk of bankruptcy. And yet they say Altman called this region an area of uncertainty. The company can go either way. So further investigation is required to confirm the risk level. And because of this, it means if you're going to be making a decision to give credit to the customer, give credit with caution. And if you check in Bandoyapadi as well, if you check in Bandoyapadi says if your Z score is greater than 2.99, the firm is in a good shape. It's a green signal, which means you can give credit to the customer. But if your Z score is less than 2.99 but greater than 1.81, it's a warning signal about deteriorating health of the firm. So give credit with caution. Then if your Z score is less than 1.81, the firm is in big trouble and could be heading towards bankruptcy. So in this case, if your Z score is less than 1.81, do not give credit to the customer. So therefore, the greater a firm's distress potential, the lower its discriminant score as well. Now, with that in mind, we are now going to write down the different formulas for the Z score. And then after that, we're going to look at that example and go through that example together as well. So those are the three different formulas that you can use to determine the Z score. Remember, we're looking at the Z score using Witzany. Then I'm also going to cover so that you clearly see the Z score given by Bandoyapadi. And we're also going to look at the Z score calculation using what? CB Joseph and the different interpretations as well. Now, going to the question, on the question, they give us that information. Can you quickly read through this information? Yeah. Can you quickly go through this particular question and we go through it together? Can you quickly read through the information that is given and we go through it together? All right, just give me a second. There's something wrong with my internet system. All right. Can you go through the question? Can you go through the question? Then we'll look at it together. All right. Can you go through the, so when you look at the information that is given, when you look at the information that is given, our X1 is your capital, your working capital to total asset ratio, which is 10%. Then our X2 is your retained earnings to total asset ratio of 20%. And our X3 is our profit before interest and tax to total asset ratio of 15%. And our X4 is your market value of equity to the book value of debt, which is 115%. And our X5 is your sales to total asset ratio, which is 125%. Now, if you plug this into the formula, it means these percentages, you need to convert them from percentages to what? To decimals. And how you convert the percentages to decimals is by what? By putting them, by dividing every percentage given there by 100%. So if you divide every percentage given by 100, you are converting these percentages that are given to what? To decimals. So which means in this case, when you are given a percentage of, so which means when you're using Witzany, when you are given, you are going to say with Witzany, 1.2 multiplied by x1. Remember we said x1 is 10%, and 10% as a decimal is 0.1, plus 1.4 multiplied by x2. X2 we said is 20%. So 20% as a decimal is 0.2, plus 2.3 multiplied by x3. X3 we said it's 15%, and 15% as a decimal is 0.15, plus 0.6 multiplied by x4. Our x4 we said it's 100%, 115%. If it's 115%, you're going to say 115 divided by 100, and you get 1.15, plus 0.999 multiplied by x5. Your x5 is given as 125%, and 125%, so it's going to be 125 divided by 100, which gives you 1.25. And this is your x5. So given this information, how much would you get as your z-score? So given this information there, how much would you get as the z-score? So given this calculations, how much would you get as the z-score if you use Witzany? how much would you get as the Z-score?
You get 2.55.
You must get 2.68. Are we getting the same amount?
Ah,
Yeah,
no, I'm getting 2.55. Do we convert how many decimal places?
I rounded this off to 2 decimal places, but you can indicate even 3 decimal places is also acceptable.
Okay. Why am I getting 2.55? Where did I go wrong? Okay, let me start again.
Please note, this is supposed to be 1.2, right? Multiplied by 0.1. And then 1.4 multiplied by that.
Oh, I see where I got it wrong.
Okay. Are you getting 2.68 now?
Yes.
All right. So you should be able to get a Z-score of 2.68. Now, if you go back to Witzany, they say in Witzany, if you go back to Witzany, when you look at the interpretation of the Z-score, they say Altman also estimated an optimal upper boundary of 1.8 and a lower boundary of 2.99, which is a fail, right? Which means in this case, they are saying our Z-score, if it's our Z-score of 2.68 there, right? We got a Z-score of 2.68. And what do we see about this particular Z-score of 2.68? 2.68 is actually greater than 1.81, and it's less than what? 2.99, is it? It's somewhere in between. It's less than 1.81. The 2.68 is it's greater than 1.81, but at the same time, it's less than 2.99. So which means in this case, it means that it's within that region, which is somewhere in between 2.99, isn't it? Remember we said when your Z-score is less than 1.81, do not give credit. When your Z-score is greater than 2.99, give credit. Don't worry about it, right? Don't worry about it, but give credit confidently. But when your Z-score is somewhere in between here, you can give credit, but with what? Caution. So which means here your conclusion would be give credit with caution. So you need to give credit with caution. Why? Because your Z-score is somewhere in between there. Are we on the same page? Now, if we were using the same calculation, so if we're using the same calculation, but now analyzing using Bandoya-Paddy, right? It means if we're using Bandoya-Paddy, it would be 1.2 multiplied by x1. Remember we said x1 is 0.1 plus 1.4 multiplied by x2. X2 is 0.2 plus 3.3 multiplied by x3. And remember we said x3 is 0.15 plus 0.6 multiplied by x4, and x4 is 1.15 plus 0.9999 multiplied by x5, and the x5 in this case is 1.25. Do you see where this formula is different from Witzany? It's different from Witzany because here we're using 3.3 and Witzany was using what? 2.3. So that's where the difference is with Witzany as well. So if you do the calculation there, you see that you should be able to get a Z-score of 1.71. So you should be able to get a Z-score which is equal to 2.83 with Bandoya-Paddy. So with Bandoya-Paddy, you should be able to get a Z-score which is equal to 2.83. Are we on the same page? Now, what do we see about what they say about the Z-score in Bandoya-Paddy? When you look at the interpretation of the Z-scores in Bandoya-Paddy, they say, so when you look at the interpretation of the Z-scores in Bandoya-Paddy, they say, if your Z-score is more than 2.99, you're fine. if your Z-score is less than 1.81, fail. Then in between, it's a yellow signal, isn't it? So what do we find there? Our Z-score is 2.83, and as you can see here, 2.83 is less than 2.99, but at the same time, it's greater than 1.81. So it's less than 2.99, but at the same time, it's greater than 1.81. So what does that mean? Your conclusion would be, therefore, give credit with caution, because it can go either way. Are we on the same page? Then, if it's CB Joseph, our Z-score would be 1.2 multiplied by x1, which is equal to 0.1, plus 1.4 multiplied by x2, which is equals to 0.2, plus 3.3 multiplied by x3, which is equals to 0.15, plus 0.6 multiplied by x4, which is equals to 1.15, plus 0.1 multiplied by x5, which is equal to 1.25. And with CB Joseph, you must be able to get a Z-score which is equal to 1.71. So you must be able to get a Z-score which is equal to 1.71. Are we on the same page? Now, let's look at the interpretation of the Z-score. When you look at the interpretation of the Z-score according to CB Joseph says, if your Z-score, as you can see here, if your Z-score is greater than 2.8, low or negligible risk of bankruptcy. If your Z-score is less than 1.8, very high risk of bankruptcy. And if your Z-score is greater than 1.8 but less than 2.88, then it means there's a moderate risk of bankruptcy. So what do we see here when we look at the analysis using CB Joseph? When you look at the analysis using CB Joseph, we see that the Z-score of 1.71 is less than 1.81. So the Z-score of less than 1.71 is less than 1.81. So therefore, there is high risk of bankruptcy. Do not give credit. So there's a high risk of bankruptcy. Therefore, do not give credit. So, as you can see, the most important thing that you need to take note there is that when you are given this particular question, I'm highlighting this so that you know that there is 3 different formulas that are going to be dealing with as well. So based on this, it means if ever this question comes in the exam, make sure that you write down the formula. Make sure that you write down the formula so that the lecturer would know which formula you're using. And your conclusion should be consistent with your formula as well. Are we on the same page? So your conclusion should be consistent with the formula as well. Very, very important.
Reynolds, can I ask?
Mm-hmm.
So will they let us know which formula to use, or are we just going to decide the one that we use and then we'll indicate, like we'll write the whole formula?
You write down the full formula, because if you write down the full formula, the lecturer will know which formula you're using based on which book.
So we can use any formula?
You can use any formula as long as you indicate which formula you're using there. That's the most important thing. Are we on the same page?
So may I please ask, will we ever be required to show all 3 formulas at any given time, or even compare?
No, just one.
Okay.
Just one. You need to, that's why I'm saying you need to indicate the formula that you're using. So you can either use this or use this, or use that. You need to use one of those three. I'm giving
Okay.
them together so that you already know and keep it at the back of your mind that when we go through Witzany and when we go through Bandoyapadi and when we go through CB Joseph, you are going to encounter these formulas that might end up conflicting when it comes to your conclusion. So for academic purposes, make sure that you write down the formula that you're using. For Rsk4804, you need to show the formula so that the lecturer can follow. And your conclusion should be consistent with your answer as well.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions?
Solely right now. So it means that you need to memorize this either one of the formula that you're going to use, or is
Yes,
it
you need to
gonna
memorize.
be?
Yes, you
Okay.
need to
All
memorize
right.
it because for Rsk4804, you don't have a formula sheet. So you need to memorize these formulas as well. You're expected to know these formulas off by heart. All right. Let's end here today. Please note the next class that we're having is the assignment class. So we're going to be looking at assignment 1. I'm going to guide you through to see exactly how do we approach assignment 1. Where are these questions coming from in relation to the material that we've covered in the textbook so that you understand how the questions are asked as well. Someone is asking about the exam. Yes, the exam is open book. You are, in a way, they say it's open book because you are able to access the PDF document of on your laptop as well. You are able to access the PDF document. But at the same time is always going to be a constraint for you to now refer back to every formula if you're going through the exam. So keep that in mind as well. All right, enjoy the rest of your weekend.